All right, we're diving into a paper today that could really reframe the entire conversation we're having about artificial general intelligence. The argument here is pretty bold. It says we might not just be building AI wrong, we might be missing a whole piece of the puzzle. Let's get into it.
You know this debate. I'm sure you've been in it. Is something like ChatGPT a genius in the making, a new kind of intelligence? Or is it just a really, really good parrot, just stitching together words it's seen before without any real understanding?
And the conversation usually splits right down the middle, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the people who say large language models are basically just complex prediction machines, just guessing the next word. And on the other side, you've got people who are seeing the glimmers of real consciousness, a new kind of mind being born.
But what if both of those arguments are completely missing the point? This paper suggests the problem isn't the AI model itself. It's that we're looking at an incomplete system. It's kind of like staring at a massive, powerful car engine sitting on a shop floor and wondering why it can't drive. Well, of course it can't. There's a critical layer missing.
So to really get what this missing layer is, we need a new way to think about all this. So let's forget the parrots and the geniuses for a minute. Let's think about an ocean instead. So picture this. The large language model, the LLM, is a huge, deep ocean. And everything it learned during training, every single fact, idea, and concept, is a fish swimming around in that ocean. Now, the most common, boring ideas, they're like schools of tiny common fish everywhere. But the really rare, brilliant insights, those are like strange, deep-sea creatures. They're definitely in there, but they're way, way harder to find.
Okay, so when you ask the model a question, what you're really doing is casting a big, empty net into this ocean. And what are you probably going to catch? Right, the most common fish. This is exactly why LLMs often give us answers that sound okay, but are kind of generic and bland. It's not that the model is dumb, it's just catching what's most plentiful. So you see, the problem isn't the ocean itself. The ocean is incredible. It's full of amazing things. The problem is us. The problem is how we're fishing. We need to stop just casting empty nets and hoping for the best. We need a smart fisherman.
And this is where the paper introduces its big idea, something it calls a coordination layer. And you can think of this as the smart fisherman, an intelligent system that sits on top of that big ocean of an LLM and guides it, directs all that amazing potential toward a specific goal. So, how does this smart fisherman actually work? Well, the paper breaks it down into 3 key jobs. First, you have to anchor your goal, which is like using the right bait. Second, you have to filter your results. You got to check what you caught. And third, you need memory. You have to remember where the good fishing spots are. So first up is anchoring. This is all about giving the model a really clear, stable target. You give it specific examples or rules to follow. It's exactly like using the right kind of bait. Now, the bait doesn't magically create new fish in the ocean, right? It just attracts the right kind of fish that were already there. And that's what anchoring does. It pulls the model's attention toward a single, coherent line of thought. Next up is filtering. Okay, so even with the best bait, you might pull up something that looks right at first, but isn't. This layer is like an internal referee, or maybe a little voice inside that's constantly asking questions like, wait a second, is this actually consistent? Are we just using fancy words to hide a weak argument? It's not about making the model more confident, it's about making it smarter by being more skeptical of its own answers. And finally, there's memory. This one is huge. You know how when you talk to an LLM, it can feel a little forgetful from one prompt to the next? This coordination layer fixes that. It actually remembers its own train of thought, its assumptions, its conclusions. And because it remembers, it can go back, revise its thinking, and get better over time. It turns a one-off answer into a real, evolving process. So you put all this together, and it leads to what is honestly the wildest claim in the whole paper. The authors argue that reasoning, this ability we're chasing, it doesn't just slowly get better and better. No, it happens all at once. It's a sudden aha moment, something scientists call a phase transition. So what's a phase transition? Just think about water. At 99 degrees Celsius, it's just hot water, right? But you add that one extra degree, you hit 100, and what happens? Boom! It instantly becomes a totally different thing, steam. The change wasn't gradual. It was a sudden, massive shift as soon as it crossed that critical point. And the paper says AI reasoning works exactly the same way.
Before you get the conditions just right, the model's answers are unstable, fragile. It feels like it's just guessing. But once you cross that critical line with the right kind of coordination, bam, its behavior suddenly becomes stable, it becomes predictable, it becomes robust. It literally leaps into a state that looks, for all the world, like real reasoning.
So the obvious question then is, how do we trigger that leap? How do we get it to that aha moment? Well, the paper basically lays out a kind of recipe for us, a formula that tells us exactly what ingredients we need to cook up some stable thinking. And this recipe has 3 main ingredients. First, you need what's called consistent support. That just means all your clues and all your data need to be pointing in the same direction. Second, you need low instability, meaning the model's reasoning shouldn't just fall apart if you ask the question in a slightly different way. And third, you need controlled information. Turns out just dumping in tons of irrelevant data can actually make things worse.
And this all gets wrapped up into a simple formula. Now, don't worry, you don't need to be a mathematician here. All it's really saying is that when your consistent support is strong enough to beat out the system's natural instability and all that noisy extra info, this value, S, flips from negative to positive. And when that happens, poof, the system crosses the threshold. It makes the leap into that stable, predictable reasoning state.
If this still feels a little abstract, think about how a little kid learns what a cat is. They don't sit down and memorize a dictionary definition, right? They anchor the word cat to this whole web of experiences. What fur feels like, the sound of purring, pointy ears, chasing a laser pointer. And then one day, it all just clicks into place. It's a phase transition. The word cat suddenly becomes a stable, useful concept in their mind. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, this way of thinking, this whole framework, it really leads to a major shift in perspective. It means we should probably be asking a whole new set of questions about AI. The key takeaway is this. Maybe the path to AGI isn't just about making the models bigger and bigger, building a bigger ocean. Maybe the real hard work ahead is designing better systems to navigate that ocean. It's about building a smarter fisherman. The future of AI might have less to do with the model itself and everything to do with these coordination layers we build around them. And that leaves us with the central question this paper really wants us to wrestle with. Let's stop arguing about the philosophical, maybe unanswerable question of does it truly think, and let's start asking a much more practical, much more powerful one. Under what specific engineerable conditions can we make it behave as if it thinks? Because answering that question, well, that might just be what unlocks the entire next chapter of AI.